questions, but we need to get the mic people. There are mics. You can use mics.
And there's mic people that go with.
Mic people.
They're a unique tribe that we have allowed to come into our territory.
That's right.
So be sure to be aware of them, and if you have an inquiry, wait for that mic to find you.
That's right. That's right. So what we'll have you do, please, is to raise your hand, and you will be given a mic. The reason we're using the mics is because this is being recorded, and if you just shout out, it won't catch up. So, and if you can remember to identify who you are, so they know who they're speaking to.
Yeah, that's a protocol thing for us.
Where are you?
I also will be passing to the right and left side of you, so if there's a question in the middle, it'll be handed directly to you from the left to right side.
Oh,
Questions?
come on, burning
Don't all
questions.
rush at once, okay?
I was like, hey, there you go. I was about to say, they're all experts now. Hey.
I took notes, though.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Solitaire. I have ancestral lineage from Hawaii and from the Philippines, but I came to Yelamu with my family when I was like a teenager. And just like what you were saying, I didn't even know of the term Ohlone until like maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I started being in communities that really were about decolonialization and just like, whoa, yeah, oh my goodness. So thank you so much for speaking on all that and sharing that. I'm here today because I am a preschool teacher and I work at a really special preschool. It's located here in the city, and we really want to decolonialize our curriculum and not just have like a multicultural, like, oh, one day, hey, the native people of these lands, okay, great, and then the rest of the time, you know, not acknowledging or finding ways to partner with Native folks. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on how an educator can bring that into schools and partner with folks. Yeah.
We were talking about this actually earlier, including at lunch. One of the things, well, first of all, we fired our previous PR firm that didn't let people know about the Ohlone people. But the last couple of years, we've been a little more successful with letting people know that Ohlone people are still here. But what we haven't done is been able to have enough people to meet all the need now that has come up. And just in the last 2 years, and especially the last 5 months, I think, you know, I'm pretty sure about Corrina, and I know Kanyon and I have been inundated with requests. There just isn't enough of us. So that's the reality. So we're a victim of our own PR success, I guess. Sort of, kind of. What is available, though, although I'm one of the last ones to say that, is to go on the internet, because there are places on the internet. You have to be careful. Plus, people have their own perspectives. Maybe I'll come back to that part in a minute. But there are resources now. Kanyon has one. Shameless plug.
I'm trying to point out you and your amazing work with your coalition.
I haven't got to that part yet.
But I do want to say something after.
Is your link on the coalition on your website too?
CanyonConsulting.com has multiple book recommendations, and the Ohlone curriculum exists that the East Bay Regional Parks District has created, and Gregg has a bio page, CanyonConsulting.com, both of those are with Ks, /Gregg, Gregg, where I have highlighted the top links that he always talks about from being part of the Native Programs Committee at the Society for California Archaeology and the amazing California Indigenous Curriculum Coalition work. There's a link, and he's trying to push it into all the schools, but I got a few other things. Keep going.
I formed a coalition with people who know what they're doing, so that hopefully they'll take it over. That's the whole point. I had a great idea, and then I found people to do it. That's the ideal way to do it. And they keep dragging me into it, though. It's a coalition of academics out of Sac State, CSU Sacramento, in the College of Education. And we're trying to address the curriculum that other people have done, but we're doing it a different way. because we found that a lot of communities were seeing the need and realizing they were not going to be able to wait for government to address it or the schools themselves. So they were doing it themselves. And that had been done in the past, but the curriculum that were written were not up to snuff, so to speak. Or were considered not up to snuff, so they were dismissed because it is still a controversial topic depending on how it's presented. The coalition is formed around communities that have written the curriculum based on the new framework that was done 3 years ago for the third grade that recommended that you not teach the mission project anymore with popsicle sticks and sugar cubes, but kind of then gave crickets when they said, well, what do we do now? We'll get back to you. And they're still working on that. So the coalition had already been working and found a number of communities willing to post their curriculum online for free. The East Bay Regional Park District Ohlone curriculum is one of them. And they all meet the standards at various ways in different viewpoints. But the intention is that there be local, that they're specific to certain areas. So it's the indigenous viewpoint, either written by them or with them to express their history, their culture, and their viewpoint. So if you see me after, I can probably give you the URL, or you can look on her website. It should be on there.
Can I just add something really quickly? Because Gregg said if you go on the internet, you can find stuff. But be careful. So if you see anything with dancing dream catchers or flute music, go away from it. Okay? Just leave it alone, because that's probably not a curriculum that Ohlone people have done or have been part of. So just wanted to put that disclaimer in there.
Teepees is another one. If you see teepees anywhere near, yeah.
Corrina, if you go on Google right now and you type Ohlone and then you say the word Prezi, Prezi, there has been a class that I don't know what school it is, but they decide that they allow the kids to have a Prezi presentation to talk about our beliefs and our practices. And they cite people like Tutwiler, who talks about how we talk to Satan and how they know how we got married and how they know how we had ceremonies. And I'm sitting here like, okay, this is extra motivation why Kanyon Consulting is focusing on cultural competency trainings, workshops with Indigenous insights, talking about equity and diversity and inclusive verbiage, i.e. the messaging of instructors, putting us in present tense versus past tense. And it's my goal to teach the teachers. So I'm finding my way to try and get to talk to the teachers versus constantly being bugged on Rent Your Token Native Month, i.e. October and November, where everybody wants themselves a native, but they don't even have a conscious relationship where they say, oh, maybe I should contact them in spring or maybe even the previous year to see if they really are interested and establish a relationship versus, hey, in a week or two, we have this thing and we want you to come to our school. And it's tokenization to the max. And also, but I understand that some of the teachers are my friends and they are not tokenizing me. However, they themselves are stretched thin, and I recognize it, and I'm compassionate and empathetic, and I struggle in setting my boundaries because I'm like, truth needs to be shared to the best of my ability, and it's exhausting and overextended. And so this is where allies and capacity building and solidarity is very, very beautiful and necessary. If you're a part of an organization or an institution, you can actually advocate for more layers of truth in history. Like one conference I was at, they heard me just talk about this struggle. And before the next year, when they had saved the date for the next conference, they said, we recognize that we are in Yelamu, in Ramaytush Ohlone territory. And if you want to learn about the native territories that you travel and work at, go look at native-land.ca, and that has a language map. And they even give the disclaimer, this is always being updated. Please know that it is not a perfect map. Please know that we are community trying to provide this to community. We appreciate updates. So they give a respectful disclaimer that we're all learning and we're all growing, and this is ways that you can learn about the languages of the territory that you're in. And I didn't even have to push for that. And it was on the top fold of their website. And then more agencies can have links and share about the current struggles and issues and community occurrences like Shumi land tax, how you can have a voluntary contribution to learn about the Indigenous peoples, a voluntary contribution to help get land back, and different layers of advocacy. So I'm all about kind of starting those bridging conversations and attempting to find what avenues of a reciprocal relationship building can look like. MOUs, MOAs. And I'm trying to go for the MOR of recognition. And all of these things.
There's a couple more questions in the back.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Cecilia Melion. I'm an anthropology student here at San Francisco State. I'm also an enrolled member of the Tohono Nation of Arizona. As an indigenous person who is indigenous by birth to this land, but not the culture, and as someone who's just unaware of what to do in situations like this, and in acknowledging the land that we're on, as individuals, as family members, as members of organizations, what can we do in our daily lives to acknowledge the land and to acknowledge the people that are still here that don't have tribal recognition and don't have a lot of the benefits that someone like my people do?
So first of all, thank you for that question. And I think it, one of the beauties that has been in our territories is that, as Professor Barker said when she was opening up, was that this has become one of the largest intertribal places in the country and in Canada, right? And so what a blessing to have all of our relatives from different parts of the country coming here. And what a struggle that was for our relatives that had to come here because of relocation policies of the United States government. And so I acknowledge that. And I grew up in Intertribal Friendship House and was on the board of Intertribal Friendship House. I nursed my son while I was on the board of Intertribal Friendship House. My children are Choctaw and Arapaho, as well as Ohlone. And so I understand that struggle. And so we, as an intertribal group of folks, I think are also learning. Even while I was growing up at Intertribal Friendship House and all the organizations in the Bay Area still had no knowledge that there was Ohlone people and would call on our relatives, the Pomos, to come and do openings for us at the very beginning. And that's okay, I think, because we weren't ready yet, maybe. And we were learning still to have a voice, really, because when I talk about the generations or the three consecutive waves of genocide that happened here, it was very difficult for our elders to come out and speak about being Ohlone.
Yes.
It was just our
Generation
that's been able to do this work. So it's been because of our big mouths that people know that we exist still, right? I go so often sometimes I talk at places and say, I'm a figment of your imagination because we are supposed to be gone, right? That we are not federally recognized, whatever that means, And the federal recognition process is really a racist process, especially around California Native people. And so that's not something that I want to do. But I am encouraged to bring back our sacred spaces and our language and our ceremonies and our songs, and I want to share that with my relatives that also live here on this land. I've worked in education for many decades, and with the young people being the third and fourth generation of relocation kids, never been home. And I know what that means, but that doesn't mean that we can't be good hosts to our indigenous relatives that are here. And so we offer space at our community gardens to grow food that are traditional to your home, to have ceremonies if that's what you want to pray together in an intertribal way. And I think that that's it, is that we see each other again. Mm-hmm. We acknowledge each other. I think one of the best things that's happened is my relationships with the folks that are from the Pacific Islands, right?
Yeah.
That they really understand what creating those relationships are and asking permission to be on our lands and always reach out to us. I had this beautiful, over the summer for some reason, I had a lot of Aboriginal people from Australia that reached out to me. One woman came for a conference in Oakland, and it wasn't opened up by an Ohlone. Nobody had asked us to do it. And she reached out, didn't know me, didn't know anything about my work, Googled local Ohlone person in Oakland and found me. Sent me a Facebook message and said she had to be welcome because it's part of their protocol that their elders tell them that when they go to someone else's land, you must meet the elder or the person that's representing that land and be okay so you can be safe on our lands, right? And so for us to go, that's a reciprocity. We understand that relationality, right? The Maori people do the same thing. Young dance group came and they did an exchange with our northern Pomo relatives, and they came into our arbor, an arbor that we have not had in our territory in 250 years, but because we have done that work here with people that are allies and accomplices and intertribal people helping us to put that stuff together, right? Because of those ceremonies and blessings, those kids came and we met them. And somebody else was supposed to meet them, and they couldn't meet them for whatever reason, and they could not travel farther than they had once they reached San Francisco. So I crazily came over here to San Francisco, and I met them at an In-N-Out burger place.
Traditional tribal.
Traditional tribal way,
Food.
right? And I fed all of them. I bought them all their burgers. I prayed with them for their safety and sent them along their way. And when they came back into our territory, we gifted them and we fed them again at our arbor. And that's the way we're supposed to do stuff, right? That's the way that we're taught to do stuff. And so when you come into our territories, eat with us, laugh with us, pray with us, do those things, you know? Don't just call on us to come and open something up. But I appreciate what's going on, because when I was talking to the young woman from Australia, she said, I don't understand this. Every single time something is opened up in Australia, an Aboriginal person is there to talk about their lineage, to talk about the land, to talk about what their original names were. Our relatives in Canada are doing that as well, and we are catching up here in the States, right? So when I talked earlier and spoke about don't just come for us for the words. It is important, those words. But I think that it's not
enough.
It's also important for us to have the time to breathe and figure out what those words are. And if those words are uncomfortable, like an organization that's represented in this room right now that I'm not going to say, it's okay for people to feel uncomfortable. And I think it's actually appropriate for people to feel uncomfortable, to acknowledge the genocide that happened on our lands, to acknowledge that these lands are stolen and occupied, to acknowledge that these people still exist. And I think that those are appropriate things to do. And so, but it takes a while to actually come up, like my brother Gregg said, using this English language to figure out how to say those things in a good way. And I know I went way past what you asked for, but I guess those ancestors start talking. I don't know what to do.
Blaming them. The only thing I'd add to that is that in this work that we do, we're also dealing with our own internal things on a very high, deep level. You know, I'm out here because I'm the only one from my community that will talk publicly for all kinds of reasons. And it doesn't matter, because I think that's common amongst most of the communities, that there's not that many people that are willing to talk publicly. And the other part that has to be, remember I talked about that history of 500 years versus 15,000 years. And that 500 years, or in this case, next month will be the 250th commemoration of Portola, who was the first land expedition that came to intentionally colonize. We'd had European visitors before, but 250 years ago, Portola came with the express intent to colonize California on behalf of Spain and start the devastation. And people are calling us to like, hey, can you come and open our celebration?
Right.
No, I can't.
That's a nice way of saying it.
Yeah, yeah. And so And one of the things, if they decide to engage a little further, because they don't know what to do with that at first, then I tell them, we're still in first contact. We are still in first contact because 250 years ago to us is like last week in terms of our cultural tribal continuity here. And we're still struggling with language and more on how to deal with the newcomers and everything they brought with them. And how do we form relationships again with our tribal brothers and sisters back east, which we apparently had thousands of years ago. We had trade networks going all the way back to the Midwest. We know that. And archaeologists are finally admitting it because they're finding the traces. So it's now valid because they found it. So we're reestablishing that because, as she said earlier, when I was growing up in San Jose, which has a huge Native population, they didn't know the local people around. I went into the Indian Center when I was 14 years old to looking for a scholarship. And when he asked me my tribe, and I said, well, we're Ohlone, which was the name we used for ourselves years ago. My parents did. Well, what's that tribe? Well, that's, just, down the road a little ways, in Monterey County. And they, well, those people aren't around anymore. And this was an elder telling me this from somewhere else. And that was the typical experience at the time. So we're still in that in the middle of that process with all the progress we made, especially lately. We're still in that learning process and healing process for us internally.
Alito, himoknetaka takinli oke, mitja anumpa takinli oke. Sa hochchefo at Robert Keith Collins, mitja nanikanachi sa at mitja chahta istiali. So for those of you who are going, what is he saying? I said hello in the Choctaw language. Today is a really good day, and your talk is wonderful. My name is Robert Keith Collins, and I'm a teacher here in American Indian Studies Department. And I want to piggyback off of something that Miss Sayers, I won't say Miss Sayers part deux because you're two different people, but you do have a lot of your mama. I want to piggyback off of something that you said about teaching the teachers. Inside of the Cal State, there's a movement amongst the professors to really have you educate the professors and teach the professors about land acknowledgement and recognition. So I would pose this to all of you. If there was 3 things you could say or have us learn from you about land acknowledgement, what would it be? And if all of you had, and I liked Harry Potter because I have a ton of little cousins, if you could all wave a magic wand and have us say something or do something, what would it be? And then the last part, I like the idea, and I can't remember who brought it up, but the idea of possibly zooming in or coming to visit to talk to the professors who are engaged in this might be something, if I may, reach out to you to do, but the main part of that was the questions.
The magic wand.
The magic wand. Okay, we're done.
Wingardium
Let's go
Acknowledgiosa.
We're done now. Go to break.
Well, I'm obsessed in wanting to teach the teachers. I'm definitely obsessed in wanting to teach the teachers. So talking about present tense, inclusive phrasing, but that would mean establishing relations with the indigenous community of the territory that you're at to get cohesive verbiage and connection about what that community does or doesn't want to be spoken about them. So relationship building, community building, bridging that, present tense, and resources of getting connected, but also just layers of how do we decolonize and re-indigenize our ways of life. Imagine, instead of everyone being yelled at about how you can conserve water, there's a protocol or a mandate on anybody creating new toilets or doing plumbing that their gray water from the sink and shower needs to go immediately right into the back of the toilet. Or let's talk about changing processes and protocols of caring about the earth, having a reciprocal relationship to caring and stewarding the land as a expectation, but following indigenous communities' leadership about how to tend and steward the territory that they're at, so it's not like this permaculture, let's put swales everywhere, without even talking to the land and listening intentfully and bridging an opportunity to connect with communities who've always been there and stewarding. So relationship building with the indigenous communities of the land that you're on.
I don't talk often to elementary schools because I have a 9-to-5 job, so I don't have that opportunity. I talk to various college classes when I have the opportunity, and one of the colleges I talk to frequently, Cabrillo College over in the coast, Santa Cruz. The professor there, when I was talking to a class a couple of years ago, somebody asked a question, which I can't even remember the question, but I remember my response. What I decided to do, he had a big whiteboard that's about as long as these 2 tables, so I just drew a timeline and started talking about it. And I didn't think it was a big deal, but he said it generated a lot of conversation in the next couple of classes because it was a matter of perspective, that what I said about, what they view of and are taught in their own schools about their long history of 500 years, and then we talk about 15, 20,000 years, time immemorial. And the difference in being in this place and still being in this place, and what that means in terms of again, English fails when you talk about a deep, intimate connection with the place that gave you birth. It is, we use those terms and they're not colloquialisms. And when we talk about the earth is our mother, we really mean it because it is. In our case, it grew that grew us. And so having that perspective, just that by itself, that time perspective and that personal, intimate connection, I think is a good place to start the conversation. And sometimes I kind of relate it to, like, if you grew up in if you have a family that's been here for a while, or do you still have your family home where you grew up? How about your parents? Maybe your parents are still there, right? So you know this place. You know every door. You know every kitchen cabinet. You know the tiles. You know the rug. You know everything about it. Now imagine maybe being there 6 generations and the land around it. Maybe you still have a ranch or something. Now imagine being in a place for 15,000 years. Kind of multiply that, do the math, and then see what it comes to you.
I want a magic wand. Sometimes I want to be Harry Potter. I want a hippogriff, and I want to fly off on it. I don't have an answer for that. I think that's the problem. The problem is that everybody's asking us for that answer. I think I want to sit down. I don't have a quick answer for it. I do. I'd be interested in sitting down and working with the universities because, we're blessed to be able to have Indigenous professors in these halls, and I'm sorry that that's your burden, because really I know that these halls are not made for us. But I do want to say that we will need to work together for you all that know how to speak that language, for us to really say what we need to say in our hearts of hearts. And so I think that that's a longer discussion. It is a way of bringing us to the table, a way for us to continue to have relationships with each other. And I think that it has to be an ongoing statement that changes constantly, because otherwise it becomes this thing that you say, like who's ever said the Pledge of Allegiance every single day while you're in school? Who remembers what it means, though, right? So if you begin to say something over and over again, at the beginning it becomes something that's just rote and it doesn't mean anything. So in order for that to not become that way, I think it needs to be changed, like a constant conversation, and that other people will bring something else to it, and it'll be fresh, and it'll still resonate with what needs to be said. Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Hello. First of all, thank you so much for being here at State. I am a student. My name is Xenia, and I came here with a question today. What might land acknowledgement look like on land that has overlapping claims?
Such as?
Maybe there are overlapping claims regarding two different people.
So like in our territory on the East Bay side, there are 4 different tribes, right? And so in our territory, there's never been one overarching tribe. And so very much there are 4 different tribes that are there, right? And every different tribe might have a different way of doing it. And I think whoever you have a relationship with, as long as that's their tribal territory, then they should be able to do it the way that they want to. There should not be anybody saying that you have to do it in this particular way. If you have relationships with 2 different groups of people that are claiming the same territory like our territory is, then you should invite both of them to do that. And they can do it in the way that they feel comfortable. I don't think that you have to pick and choose. Now, Ohlones, on the other hand, are 8 different nations of people with 8 different languages and 8 different creation stories, and our songs and our dances are different. We may have shared territorial tribes on our land. So I speak Chochenyo, and there's 3 other tribes that has the same thing. My relatives here, although we all claim Ohlone kind of in some sort of way, they come from totally different lands. And so what I will always say is that not every Ohlone will do, right? Because it depends on what land you come from and who you're responsible to. We're responsible to our people, we're responsible to the land, we're responsible to our mountain, we're responsible to our waters, right? And so we are each responsible. I will not go and do a land acknowledgement in Amamutsan territory or the Indian Canyon or rumsien territory, because that's not my land and I have no responsibility in those kinds of ways. That's not my business to do that, right? And so it is always important to get the people that are from that particular territory to do that work, unless they have a relationship to do it in someplace else. Like Kanyon has a relationship with the tribal chairperson from the Ramaytush territory, and he has given permission for her to be speaking in Yalamu on behalf of their tribe to do those things. So it's really important that you do your homework as well.
I have, I think, a little bit more pointed to your question, and it's a tricky, difficult question even for us natives to talk about. But it relates to what I said earlier about first contact, and we're internally dealing with first contact. In my 30-plus years of dealing with much of California, I can't speak for anybody else, certainly outside of California. I can't speak for any other tribe but my own. But what you're looking at in the landscape now in terms of tribal communities is not how we lived. Mm-hmm. We can't live that way for all the historical reasons of genocide and cultural relocation and enslavement and all those other issues. What, in my opinion, the way I term it, what you see nowadays is a landscape of survival constructed techniques and survival strategies. And by that I mean that these communities, because in the old days, a landscape gave life to people, like I said before, and that also meant food. So you would only have one tribal authority within a landscape. That's pretty universal in California. And there was a hierarchy, there was some sort of political social system that managed and took care of that landscape because it gave them life. And that's one of the reasons you had protocols about going across people's boundaries and lands, because you're going to be going across their land, you're affecting their livelihood, their food sources. You may want to pick up a few along the way so as you're traversing across their land. So you want permission to take some of what gives them life. That's not what happens now because because of genocide, because of the brutal history of California, people were split in all different kinds of ways and then reformed for survival. And sometimes now they form organizations that coexist in the same landscape, which was not what happened traditionally. Mm-hmm. So and sometimes they work together and sometimes they don't. And that's the reality we're dealing with. And so in terms of San Francisco, that's what's happened for a long time. Mm-hmm. And what the Association of Ramaytush people decided to do is become more visible to address that issue. They are the only ones who have lineal descendancy from the land itself. Other people have a presence here, which is different. And I don't want to get more deeper than that, but often because they were brought here in this mission system. And their ancestors are died here and were buried here. But that's not the same thing as saying it's their homeland in a traditional sense. Now, if they make a decision in a modern sense to claim this is homeland, that's a whole other subject. And that's where it gets sticky even between tribes.
And one little tie into that, I struggle with this often because there's only so much information I could hold in my mind. And I recently did offer a workshop around navigating parts of land acknowledgements and honoring the land that we're on. And because of my skills in talking and being a loudmouth and opportunities and coyote energy allowing me to skirt the in-betweens and the uncomfortable places, I participated in a interesting earth-based spiritual teachings and pedagogies from over the pond. Pagan community, mix of this, talking about cultural appropriation and different topics. And I was up north, and I did not know. And so I reached out to community, and then I became familiar with the traditional territories and how many villages were known to that area and what active communities tribally were present there. So I could do my best in saying I walked poorly in being able to bridge an opportunity with the community because it was a short term. However, in my scrambling efforts, at a minimum, I need to acknowledge history of these territories, the active community members, that I could do as much research as possible, and then remind the people who are living there and working there and traveling through there, think about your relationship and honoring truth and history of these territories, these lands, and attempt to start your own relationship with bridging opportunities with these communities and how you could be in community with them. So I'm not there often. However, I have to say the names. I have to acknowledge the best that I can. It is California, so I can talk about the waves of genocide against indigenous peoples. I could talk about settler colonial mentality and how our elder, Dr. Darrell Boyd Wilson, says America is spiritually, morally, and ethically bankrupt. And my mother says the foundation of America is built on lies and deaths of indigenous peoples. So I can speak to that truth. And even in my own scramblings and attempting to walk a good walk, I will do my best. And I will continue to learn more as I go forward and attempt to bridge more communities. So soon I'll have more community members that I could contact and reach out to and say, hey, I have this opportunity to be there, and they offer this much in honorarium, and I'm offering my position in that space. 1, can I go to your territory? 2, can I speak about this topic? Or is there anything your community needs to speak about and currently going on? And then 3, with my presence here and this opportunity I've been given, is there things that we can talk about to the best of my ability? So that's usually respectful protocol.
I just wanted to add one thing to that because we deal with that as well. And what we have to keep in mind is that we at one time had matrilineal societies where it always followed the women. And when you live within that natural geographical system, ecosystem actually, you pick the plants and the animals to, as part of your clan system, and then who you are is that main system that you're living in, what you eat or which medicine that you identify with. And then that says who you are. It's the natural geographical ecosystem that identifies you as a tribe or who you are and where you live and what you eat. And then a lot of times, especially now since we've been colonized, the men will always say, well, this is our land, we lived here. But yet they're not acknowledging the matrilineal society that lived there because the men lived with who the women identified as. So it always follows the women. So we kind of have to use that as our guide.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.